So if you have your Bibles open, let's look there together. In chapter 3, starting in verse 1, it says, "Then the 7th month came, and the sons of Israel were in the cities. And the people gathered together as one man to Jerusalem. Then Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, the brothers and the priests, and Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, the brothers rose and built the altar of God of Israel to offer burnt offerings on it, as it is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. So they set up the altar on its foundation, for they were terrified because of the people of the lands. They offered burnt offerings on it to Yahweh, burnt offerings morning and evening. They celebrated the Feast of Booths, as it is written. They offered a fixed number of burnt offerings daily, according to the legal judgment and the day required. And afterward there was a continual burnt offering also for the new moons, and for all the appointed times of Yahweh that were set apart as holy, and from everyone who offered a freewill offering to Yahweh. From the first day until the 7th month, they began to offer burnt offerings to Yahweh, and the foundation of the temple of Yahweh had not been laid. Then they gave money to the masons and carpenters, and food and drink, and oil to the Sidonians and the Tyrians, to bring cedar wood from Lebanon to the Sea of Joppa, according to the permission they had from Cyrus, the king of Persia." So in these first 7 verses, again, we get some great detail of the things that were going on. Notice something, though. This really stood out to me when I was first reading it. It says that the sons of Israel were in the cities, and the people gathered together as one man to Jerusalem. What kind of picture does that paint in your mind?
United.
I mean, firmly united. It's like they weren't just gathered or congregating. You know, it wasn't just that they were all together. You know, because you can have a group of people to get together and it's still very loose in nature. This image of united as one man, together as one man, I mean, that's as tight as it gets. I read that passage and automatically I think back to Genesis in the marriage relationship, that when God set marriage into play, said that man would leave father and mother and be united with his wife, or cleave to his wife. That's the word some translations use. And that, y'all know that I've said several times, that Hebrew word cleave is the word ishad. It's used in the Shema in Deuteronomy. The Lord God is one God. That same idea of one flesh, united, where it's multiple yet singular. And so you can see here that same imagery that's obviously important to God. This idea of unity. Now, when I say unity, he could have just said that here. But this goes a little beyond that, doesn't it? This goes a little beyond just having unity. This is like solidarity, singleness, right? This is more than just being together and being on a mission. This is much deeper than that. And you see how it gets carried out. It lists all the people involved and the priests and how they offered morning and evening, as written in the law of Moses. Obviously, the law was important to them, and they were getting back to business, and that's what we see here. And so, what is the priority of the rebuilding of the altar? First, teach us about worship.
That is critical. I mean, it has to be.
It has to be. That the rebuilding in general was going to take place, and that was important. God wanted everyone to have their homes. He wanted them to rebuild their farms. He wanted them to have their life back. But none of that comes before this. Man, what a lesson that is for us when you look at the world around us. And there are a lot of people gathering to worship in various places today. And I don't want to downplay the importance of that, because it's absolutely, it's still, I think in the year 2025, to see that though we may doctrinally take issue with many that are meeting this morning, there's still a desire, whether misplaced or unfounded or misdirected, there's still a desire to seek God on some level. And that tells me we've got more in common with people than we have in opposition. In chapter 4, we're going to see how some of that plays out, some of that works out. But the point is that there's still a sort of movement in that direction, but this is different. This is something that should be aspired to on every level. Making worship the priority of everything. That everything else comes after this. Everything else is secondary to worship. Any thoughts on that? Frank?
Well, there in verse 2, it says, as it is written in the law of Moses,
Yeah.
the man of God.
Yeah.
It's written down. It's not just a good idea or
Yeah.
recommendation or do this if you want to. God said it.
That's right. You know, my best friend Scott has a saying that he lives by. Scott is he is an entrepreneur of entrepreneurs. I mean, he is so dedicated to that mindset that everything in his life revolves around that. Right? Scott was not one that I was able to lead all the way to faith, though I still think he's on some sort of journey. But he thinks this way in regards to following principles. He says all the time, he says, if it's in your head, it doesn't exist. Write it down on paper. He said, until it's written physically, it doesn't exist. It's just in your head. Nobody else knows what you're thinking. But once you've written it down, now people can know what you're thinking. And I think that's a great point, that this was written down. This wasn't just an idea. This wasn't even just an oral tradition. This was on paper. It was concrete. I mean, and think about it. We still have it, don't we? That's how important writing things down is. We still have it. This wasn't just something for them, that in 2025 we can look back to this time period and go, oh, wow, yeah, we still have this. It's a great point, Frank. Ms. Carmen?
Well, it's like when Moses, in anger, threw the tablets down and broke them. Jehovah's, literally, the first response was, I will remake them. Carve them out, bring them to me, I will write it.
Yeah. It's important, isn't it?
Very.
Not coincidentally, I say this all the time too, but I think that's why Jesus is called the Word. It lasts.
The living one.
The living Word. So let's read on for a second. I want to get to this question. In verse 8, it says, now in the second year of their coming to the house of God at Jerusalem in the second month, Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel, Jeshua the son of Jozadak, and the rest of the brothers and the priests and the Levites, and all who came from the captivity to Jerusalem began their work, and appointed the Levites from 20 years and older to direct the work of the house of Yahweh. Then Jeshua with his sons and brothers stood united with Kadmiel and his sons, the sons of Judah, and the sons of Henadad, and their work with their sons, and brothers of Levites, and to direct those to do the work in the house of God. So the builders laid the foundations of the temple of Yahweh. Then the priests stood there with their apparel, with the trumpets, and the Levites, the sons of Asaph, with the cymbals, to praise Yahweh according to the directions of King David of Israel. And they sang, praising, giving thanks to Yahweh, saying, for he is good, for his loving kindness endures forever upon Israel. And all the people shouted with a great shout when they praised Yahweh, because of the foundation of the house of Yahweh was laid. Yet many of the priests and Levites and heads of their fathers' households and old men who had been to the first house of Yahweh were weeping with a loud voice when the foundation of his house was laid before their eyes, while many in loud shouts with gladness were raising their voice, so that the people could not distinguish the voices of the shouting of gladness from the voices of weeping of the people, for the people were shouting with a loud shout, and those whose voices were heard far away. Why do you think some rejoiced while others wept at the new foundation?
Well, it was such an emotional event. I mean, and the tears come from that emotion.
Absolutely.
God has created us that way, to release it absence of not having had it.
Absolutely. Notice that when it says that, it says, many of the priests and Levites and head of fathers and old men who had seen the first house of Yahweh were weeping. These were people who had seen the original. And they had been without it for how long? At least 70 years. Something consider. I saw two hands over here then, George.
Yeah, to me, it's an age thing. Those
Yeah.
that are young rejoice because they have a temple. Those that are old, like you said, they haven't had a temple for so long that it was so emotional.
Absolutely. George?
I was thinking about the older people who had seen the one, how much different this one was.
There's a lot to consider. why some would be rejoicing and others would be weeping. And that weeping, doesn't designate whether it's like grief or sadness or joy. But, I can attest to the fact that the older I get, the more sentimental I get. And things that used to not set me off do now. And, it's you look at things differently, And I think that's going on here. I think you make a great point that these men had been without. And, to now have it again, to have something that you lost. I mean, think about it when you've lost something and you've been without it for so long and now you have it back. It might just be some old dumb pocket knife, right? But if it was a pocket knife that my grandpa gave me when I was little and I lost it, it's just a little pocket knife, doesn't mean anything, and then I find it when I'm in my 30s, it might be okay to be a little emotional because it's going to remind me of something. Frank?
Did you laugh or cry first time you saw Stone?
Both. And it's this odd mix. You don't even know how to differentiate. The laughter from the crying, it's a weird thing. And someone says, were you happy or are you sad? And you can just say yes. Yes is a applicable answer in that. Ms. Carmen?
Tears are a release of whatever that deep-seated emotion might be.
Yeah, I mean, we think about, we dealt with it on a very minuscule scale with COVID and how we weren't allowed to gather in the building. And then we were allowed to gather in the building, but we had to sit every other row. And you had to wear a mask, and man, I hated that. Which made worship even more difficult because I had to get out of my own head for hating this stupid, diaper on my face. But it was getting to come back inside though. We were still here. We were just out there. And it was cool. I loved worshiping outside. There was an element of that I thought was great. To be outside, in the trees, singing, and the folks that live right there coming out on their back deck and listening. We were evangelizing in that way. And we were also making a proclamation to the world around us that everybody that drive by, they'd see us sitting out here and they knew that we weren't going to not worship. But man, when we got to come back in here, how emotional was that for some of us? Just getting to come back in those doors. Ms. Carmen?
Well, I'm thinking of the scripture that tells us that God the Father puts every tear that we weep in his bottle. Now, I don't know what the bottle really signifies other than that he takes into account every tear, and he has built us that way.
Yeah.
And that's why I use the word release. It's a release
What is?
from pain, anguish, happiness.
And there's something, I think there's something that denotes value in that to God, that he would keep our tears in a bottle. And you think, well, that's kind of sadistic. I mean, that he likes it when we cry. Yes. And I'll give you an example. This is all obviously fresh on my mind, but, when Crosby was born, just a couple months ago, and we all got to go down. Leading up to Crosby being born, Kai and Ryan had told us his middle name was going to be Dylan. And I didn't really care. Okay, great, Crosby Dylan. Cole hated that. For whatever reason, he's like, that's dumb. That's a dumb name. Dylan, what, after Bob Dylan? Gave them a hard time about it, complained about it to Kelly. Well, so we get down to see Crosby. And Kai and Ryan hadn't told anybody this yet. And Kelly heard it inadvertently because the nurse had to come in and confirm some things. But when Cole got down there and Cole's holding Crosby Dylan, Ryan tells Cole, he says, do you know his middle name? He says, yeah, Mom told me it was Dylan. He said, well, we changed it. And Cole said, to what? Crosby Cole. Whew. And Cole got all messed up, man. And when I watch the video, I still get messed up. Seeing my son reacting in joy, but with this great emotion, this release. That he had made such an issue of the middle name, but that Kaya and Ryan loved him enough to give their son that name. I don't know. It was just one of those moments, man, where you do take great pleasure when you see your kids cry. Not in some sadistic way, but because there's something real about that moment. And that's something that's lasting. And I think that when you say that, Carmen, that God keeps our tears in a bottle, how precious is that? And so to see these older Israelites here weeping at the building of the new foundation of the temple, that's absolutely warranted. And I think it's great to see the generational divide, the younger celebrating and shouting, right? It says so much so that, what does it say? It said the voices were heard far away. So I don't know, how far away we're talking, but the surrounding areas of Jerusalem knew those folks are rejoicing. They could hear that, and I think that's worth noting. Any other comments about that? Brenton?
The bottle reminds me of him numbering every hair on her head.
Yeah,
He just cares that much.
that much.
They needed that temple. And he didn't need the temple, but they did.
Right. That's a good point. You're going to get me. How do we balance then honoring the past while also embracing new beginnings? Because that's really what's going on there, isn't it? They're honoring their past, but the other half of the people are embracing new beginnings. They're excited about the future. For the first time in a long time, they've got something to hope for, something to look forward to. How do we balance that? How do we look at what we've got here that is obviously from the past? How do we balance that? Love you, brother. How do we do that? Don?
It's hard to imagine the idea of, well, not hard to imagine, but from a practical standpoint of thinking, what is balance in something like that? And is there a way to consider, I think, with respect, what has gone before, especially as it aligns with where we are? And I think maybe that's the point in my thought is, in this case, they weren't it wasn't so much about moving on to something as it was getting back to something.
Mm-hmm.
And that was renewing what had been, and what had been so right and perfect, and as stated, in accordance with God's word, getting back on track. I think that's the way that you are.
Yeah. Frank?
Why do we study the Old Testament? So that we can have a better understanding of the New Testament.
That's right. I was going to say because it's awesome.
Well, it is, but you can't hardly understand the New Testament
Without it.
having some knowledge of the Old.
That's a great point. You can't. How do you know where you're going if you don't know where you came from? I mean, what we do this morning, coming together for the Lord's Supper. I mean, how far back does that go? I mean, 2,000 years, right? Are we doing it exactly the way they did it? Well, as closely as we can, right? We are definitely observing and respecting the commands, right? And we are observing and respecting the necessary inferences and the examples. But they didn't do this in an air-conditioned building. We do. They didn't do this in padded seats. We do. You know, is there anything wrong with these things? Well, no, because the Bible doesn't speak about it. But I think we balance. I think what you're saying is exactly right, Don. We balance by observing the observable, right, and then doing what's the customary now. Mark, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I would say we balance according to God's direction.
Yeah,
We aren't to live in the past. But
That's
we
right.
are to know the past.
Absolutely.
The past is important, but we learn from it
that's absolutely right.
and move forward according to God's direction.
We're in the dark without it, aren't we?
Yeah.
Great point. So what foundation should we be laying in our spiritual lives now? This whole chapter is all about the altar being built and the new foundation being laid and getting back to what they had been and what they had done. What is the foundation that we should be laying? I don't know how much thought they gave to us during this time period. You know, are they thinking about the future of God's people? I don't know. But I know this. I know that it was written down, and so there's definitely some thought given to it in that regard. What sort of foundation are we laying for our kids, for their kids? You know, I'll look up here, you know, when everyone is here at these couple of rows of all these, 20-year-olds that we have now. I think yesterday we were talking about it. There's 21 20-year-olds in this congregation. That doesn't happen in a lot of congregations. You know, to have all these young couples, and some of these young couples are now having kids, and you see what's happening there with the generation building. What are we doing? What are we thinking about? What should we be doing to lay the foundation for them to continue what we're doing? And the reason I'm asking that is because I genuinely want to know. Because I think about it all the time. I think about how blessed we are to have so many young folks here, that our largest demographic now is them, the 20 to 30-year-olds. You know, and that Kelly and I have somehow fallen into the olds. How'd that happen? We got recliners yesterday. Don?
Especially in our culture today, I think a key part of that foundation is truth. And of course, there's two ways to look at that. There is the truth, the Word of God. We've talked about that already, about the significance and importance of that. But also, what is truth? In this post-truth world, your truth, my truth, all of the nonsense that's out there.
Yeah.
And most of that coming at that generation. lack of recognition for what truth really is. I think that's a big part of that.
Yeah. You know, one of my favorite things that we studied whenever I was a new Christian, it was from the phrase, the remnant will remain, you know. And it stuck out to me because as we're reading this, you know, and I was new in the faith, and so learning how far back all this goes and seeing, you know, the kind of tragedy that would come, that would strip away so much of Israel, and there'd only be a small amount left, and that they would rebuild, and the fact that I was like, from that remnant, we're still here. It's small actions, right? It's small actions every day that build these kind of bridges. Yes, sir.
To me, it even goes further back than the 20, 30-year-olds, back to what's being taught in these classrooms
Amen.
this morning. And I have grandchildren, and I see what they're being taught, and it's, you know, it's everything. They are so, they're like a sponge. They
Yeah.
just take it all in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great point. And we do have some pretty fantastic people putting together material for these kids. And it's good. It's good material. Frank?
Well, when I see the word foundation, the first thing that comes to mind is in 2 Corinthians 3:11. No man can lay a foundation other than the one which is laid, which is Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
That's where it starts.
absolutely. That's one of the things I love about the Lord's Supper service that we do. That we have a whole hour dedicated to the Lord's Supper. Because that guarantees that without fail, every week, we're going to have at least one sermon about Jesus and Jesus only. That's the foundation. Thank you for reminding me of that, Frank. So, in Ezra 3, we're rebuilding the altar and the foundation of the temple. We get into chapter 4, and chapter 4 is really such a real life chapter. Because it deals with opposition, it deals with discouragement, it deals with delayed progress, right? And so it's timeless in that way. Ezra chapter 4 is timeless in that way. Let's just look at it. Let's just look at Ezra chapter 4. I love it when a new chapter begins with the word then. And so you know that these are the events immediately following what's going on in chapter 3. In chapter 3, we've got people excited and hopeful and emotional over what's being done. You know, it's this rejuvenation of their faith and this reinvigoration of the work and getting back to it. Chapter 4 is where real life creeps in. Look what it says. Then the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the people of exile were building a temple to Yahweh, the God of Israel. So they approached Zerubbabel, the heads of fathers, households, and said to them, "Let us rebuild with you. For we, like you, seek your God. We have been sacrificing to him since the days of Esarhaddon, the king of Assyria, who brought us up here." But Zerubbabel and Jeshua and the rest of the heads of the fathers of households of Israel said to them, "You have nothing in common with us in building a house to our God, but we ourselves will together build to Yahweh. The God of Israel, the king of Cyrus, the king of Persia, has commanded us." So the people of the land discouraged the people of Judah and dismayed them from building, hired counselors against them to frustrate their counsel in all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the days of Darius, king of Persia. Now in the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, they wrote an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. And in the days of Artaxerxes, Bishlam, Mithredath, Tabeel, and the rest of the colleagues wrote to Artaxerxes, king of Persia, and to the text of the letter was written in Aramaic and translated from Aramaic. Rehum, the commander of Shimshai, the scribe, wrote a letter against Jerusalem to King Artaxerxes as follows. Then wrote Rehum, the commander of Shimshai, the scribe, and to the rest of the colleagues and the judges, the lesser governors, the officials, the secretaries, the men of Erech, the Babylonians, the men of Susa, and that is the Elamites, the rest of the nations, which great and honorable Osnappar took away into exile and settled in the city of Samaria and the rest of the region beyond the river. And now this is the copy to the king in which you sent him. To King Artaxerxes, your servants, the men of the region beyond the river, and how let it be known that the king of the Jews who came up from you have come to us at Jerusalem. They are rebuilding the rebellious and evil city and are completing the walls and repairing the foundations. Now let it be known to the king that if the city is rebuilt and the walls are completed, they will not give tribute, custom, or toll, and it will damage revenue of the kings. Now because we are in service of the palace, and it is not fitting for us to see the king's dishonor therefore, we have sent and made it known to the king. And that a search be made of the record books of your fathers, and that you will find the record books and come to know that the city is a rebellious city, damaging to the kings and provinces, and that they have incited revolt within it in the past days. Therefore it was a city laid waste. We make known to the king that if the city is rebuilt, the walls are completed. As a result, you will have no portion in the province beyond the river. Then the king sent an edict to Rehum the commander and Shimshai the scribe and the rest of the colleagues who live in Samaria, and now the rest of the provinces beyond the river, peace. And now the document which you sent us has been plainly read before me. So a decree has been issued by me that the search has been made, and it has been found that the city has lifted itself up against kings in past days, and rebellion and revolt have been perpetrated in it. That strong kings have been over Jerusalem, and even rulers in the provinces beyond the river, and that the tribute, custom, and toll were given to them. Now issue a decree to make those men stop, that the city may not be rebuilt, that a decree may be issued by me. Beware of being negligent in doing this matter. Why should harm increase and damage the kings? Then as soon as the copy of King Artaxerxes' document was read before Rehum and Shimshai the scribe and their colleagues, they went in haste to Jerusalem to the Jews and stopped them by force and military. Then the work of the house of God, Jerusalem, stopped, and it was stopped until the second year of the reign of King Darius of Persia. So right here, as everybody is back in action, and they're feeling like, man, we've made it back. We're gonna get back to the way things used to be. Here comes the world. And so with rebuilding, almost always comes opposition and discouragement. Why do you think opposition arises most when God's people are trying to do something good?
Because the devil's who he is.
That's probably the most solid answer I've heard. The devil's who he is. You ever notice that for selfish reasons, almost always, anytime anything good is being done, there are going to be those that want to shoot it down, and whether it's jealousy or envy or just flat out hatred. It almost always comes back to this. George?
If your people are resistant to change, so if you're rocking the boat, people are going to oppose you. Even if it's something good, especially if it's something good, if you're doing something that really makes sense and it needs to be done, well, we've always done it this way,
Yeah.
not the new way.
Yeah.
And the new way might make a lot of sense, but just the fact that we've always done it that way.
It doesn't make any sense for the devil to stop people from doing bad.
Yeah. That's a good point. So what's the difference then between accepting help and compromising with those who don't share our faith? That's what happens. That's what brought all this upon them, right? I mean, when you first read, it says, then the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard the people in exile were rebuilding the temple of Yahweh. And so they approached them and they said, hey, let us help you. We want to do the same thing you're doing. You read that and you think, oh, well, cool. These guys are coming to help. And immediately, Zerubbabel and the rest of everybody else was like, absolutely not. So what's the difference between accepting help and compromising with those who don't share your faith?
Well, the red flag is they are their adversaries. And how can they be trusted? If they had let them in, who knows what undoing they would have done.
Yeah. Think about this. In the denominational world, there's a very popular trend in pulpit swapping. The Baptist preacher will go preach at the Methodist church. The Methodist preacher will go preach at the Presbyterian church. The Presbyterian preacher will go preach at the community church. Pulpit swapping, right? And the idea is that we're bridging unity among the differences. And you think, yeah, that's a great idea. But what's actually being done there is compromise. We're going to ask you to compromise on this, and we'll compromise on something, and so we'll both give a little, and we'll compromise. Whether it's true or not, indifferent. But we'll compromise, and we'll be friends, and we'll all be happy. What would happen if the elders here let someone from another group come and preach here? Because I know this group, probably nothing. But would something false most likely get taught? Is there potential for at least one person here to maybe go, yes. That's why there's so many warnings about opposing false teaching, not tolerating false teaching. Adam's greatest sin in the garden, the reason it's called Adam's sin, was not that he ate the fruit. He tolerated Satan's presence in the garden. He was given charge back in chapter 2 to work and keep the garden. That word keep carries with it the idea of protection. The garden was under his charge. His wife was under his charge. If somebody knocks on the door and says, I need to speak to your wife, the answer is absolutely not. You can speak to me. Satan came for Eve. He didn't go for Adam. Now, we understand that Adam's standing right there with her when he eats the fruit. And yes, that was the sin. Eating the fruit, the forbidden fruit, was absolutely the sin. But it begins with Adam tolerating Satan's presence to begin with. He let him in. When you let the enemy into your house, he's going to mess some things up. And he didn't go where the garden was strong. He didn't go to Adam, who got the teaching directly from God. But he comes after Eve. And so he tolerates Satan and lets this bad thing happen. And so I think that's what we see. When we compromise, when we tolerate, I know the world's big on that, destruction is about to happen. So obviously, the people felt rejected because they weren't tolerated. There was no compromise made. And so they go and start trouble. Done, and that'll be it.
If you notice part of their appeal, let us build with you, for we seek your God as you do, and we have sacrificed to him since the days of Ezra, king of Assyria, who brought us here. So they're trying to that commonality, but they had no temple, they had no altar, they weren't in Jerusalem. I mean, there was virtually nothing about what they were doing that was in accordance with the law of God.
Right.
So